My name's Graham Nichols.
I'm Mark Bentham.
I'm Katie Holloway. You're listening to Ordinary. Hello. How are you
Good
both?
afternoon. Good, thank you.
I am good too. I just had the excitement of someone drilling through next door into a hole in the wall for a fan or something, and they managed to drill through the main electrical incomer, and there was a big explosion and smoke. So that's very exciting.
But you've got electricity. That's
We have, yes. I think weirdly it kind of created a lot of drama, but didn't manage to take the whole street out. So
okay, good.
So yeah. Anyway, that's the excitement in my life.
So if you suddenly disappear, we know it's because you've exploded.
If I disappear in a puff of smoke, it is quite disconcerting. Then when you think, is that lightning? Because it was bright enough in the brightness of the day, a bit like Jesus' return, you could say. In the brightness of the day. In the brightness of the day, there was a bright flash, and then this smoke sort of like drifted past the window, and then of course you go out and have a little look, and then there's a bloke standing sort of penitent who's drilled this hole. So that's my fun, but that's not what the podcast is about. But
it's lucky the bloke didn't kind of need medical attention.
No, he looked.
Speaking of sparks flying,
that
was a good segue.
Very good.
We're talking about dating today.
Well, carbon dating?
No, I already made that joke in our WhatsApp group. You can't claim it.
Well, I claimed it on air. You were too,
That's fine. No, human relational dating. Just by way of like banter and interest at the beginning, how did you both meet your wives? Can we talk about that?
I met Roz on a summer camp that we both did and served on, which now our boys are both on. So there you go.
Oh, they're going to come back with wives.
Hopefully, godly wives one day.
Yeah, I actually met Stuart, my husband, at the same place that his parents met, which is so maybe your boys will.
There you go.
There was a UCCF away thing, wasn't it, Katie?
It was, Quinta.
The
centre. Like people find spouses there, don't they?
Yeah, summer camps.
That's the OM sort of headquarters, isn't it, or something?
Yes, it was then. I don't know. Maybe it still is, actually. Yeah, they were there for OM. We were there with UCCF.
I've been there. I met Caroline at a party. It was a sort of semi-evangelistic...
Very secular of you, Graham.
Yeah, there's Katie and I serving away and you're partying.
It was a semi-evangelistic party in that there were some people who became Christians who invited other people to a party, but it was a pretty sort of drunken dance kind of party. But the Christians were trying not to be... Well, they were trying to dance but not be drunk.
That's difficult.
And I sort of met Caroline in the middle of this, had a slightly bizarre conversation, and then 6 months later I asked her out in an amusing way, and there we are. Carried on from there.
6 months later?
Well, yeah, I went out with another girl in between, to be perfectly honest. Or I was going out with another girl. I can't quite remember the circumstances, but...
it was a long time ago, wasn't it, Graham?
I met her, then I was in a relationship with another girl, and realised when I was with this other lady, behaving, all the way that we're going to talk about in a few moments, but I realised I thought Caroline was more interesting. And so I pursued Caroline, who, much to my amazement, was receptive, and so we started dating for a little while, and then we got married.
Great. That's good news. How long have you been married?
Since 1985, so something in 8 years. 38 years?
Yeah, 38, yeah. Oh, how long have you been married, Mark?
20 years.
Nice.
How long have you been married, Katie?
10 years.
Oh, wow. Good range.
Yeah, it's a good range. So, yes, we're talking about dating today. Should I just give us sort of a definition of dating just for our purposes today?
Yep.
So I was kind of meaning kind of a man and a woman who are both single, spending time together with a romantic intention was my kind of definition. So i.e.
A romantic intention.
Well, I wanted to talk about the goal and aim of dating and all of that, but like it's not friendship. It's not, I didn't want to talk today particularly about dating, like date nights once you're already married.
Yeah.
So that particularly like single people pursuing a romantic relationship is the topic of the day. And another, before we go into it, another kind of preface. I saw a podcast in another podcast. There are other podcasts. One that I regularly listen to, and I saw that there was an episode on dating, was like the next one. And I intended to skip it because I thought that's not relevant to me. But I was just busy doing something, so I had happened to listen to it. And I just realised how relevant it is to everybody, actually, because it's obviously relevant if you are single and pursuing a relationship, so if you are dating or would like to date. But also I was just struck by how helpful it is to engage on the topic for everyone in the church, because we all either know single people and we want to advise them, counsel them, be their friends in good ways if they are considering dating. Plus, if you're a parent or a grandparent, at some point the topic will come up with your kids in some way once they reach a certain age. So yeah, it struck me that I shouldn't have dismissed it as a topic. So listener, if you are going to dismiss this topic, don't. Give it a listen. Hopefully it'll be helpful. As Christians, is dating a good idea even? Does one of you want to go on that?
I think your definition throws up the immediate kind of challenge, which is dating a biblical definition at all, pursuing a romantic relationship? So I think the Bible recognizes there is some interface, like something in between being single and being married.
Yeah.
Doesn't talk a lot about it, but I suppose the little kind of fragments, that there's an assumption that there's a little bit of that, but not very much. So I think dating is a pretty modern concept.
Yeah.
That whole idea of a settled, sort of long-term, romantic, intimate relationship that's not marriage I think is quite quirky. I mean, I didn't realize it when I was, going out with a girl, meeting Caroline, going out with another girl, whatever. I didn't really think how much this was quite unusual in the history of the world, actually, and let alone Christianity. So I'm not sure it's a biblical concept, but there is a reality that it does happen, that people have closer friendships in order to bridge between singleness and marriage, and people have intimate relationships in order to be something in and of themselves that doesn't necessarily end in marriage, might end in sex, might not end in sex, but might have sex included, might not have sex included, might not end in marriage, might not even be intended to end in marriage. So there's a whole realm of non-biblical dating happening anyway. But even the idea of a perfect bridge between singleness and marriage doesn't seem to be really highly biblical.
Yeah. So are you saying that it's not a good idea for Christians to date?
No, I'm just saying it's not I don't think it's prohibited in the Bible. I just don't think it's a strong Bible idea. And I think that makes you cautious to say that, I think in simple terms, I don't think you should date anyone, to use that expression, that you don't have a reasonable possibility and intention of marrying. Yeah. It's not to say you have to marry the first person you date, but you have a reasonable expectation of marriage in that dating relationship, and that it quickly moves towards not being any more intimate or going towards marriage. So I think that kind of shapes my definition for that. So I think long-term relationships from an age where you are highly unlikely to marry, even if the person is a believer and highly eligible, are problematic.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a 12-year-old Christian, and you're dating a 12-year-old other Christian. Both of you have been baptized. You could say, well, that's sweet. I'm not sure that it's particularly healthy at that stage, let alone, you couldn't legally marry. It's such a long way off emotionally, psychologically, that I'm not so sure. But
I guess it becomes a question, isn't it? What is the difference, and using that 12-year-old between just being a very good friend between a boy and a girl and that going into dating and what the significance of that is. So if you were to kind of, if you were, no one would think, okay, I know, an 8-year-old being really good friends with a boy or a girl, it's just kind of, it's just normal, it's natural, no one thinks anything of it.
Although you would be surprised the labels 8-year-olds slap on their own friendships.
No, absolutely, no, and I get that, but I agree. I'm not suggesting that they don't, but it's more the sense of there is a friendship element.
It definitely is friendship. Yeah,
there's just a friendship. Then get to 12, 13, and we start using labels boyfriend, girlfriend. But again, what do we mean by that? And then the world's influence comes. So the romantic intention. What do we mean by that? In the sense of the world, what it means is sleeping together. So I think in one sense is, what are we actually saying about dating and what dating is? Is it more than, on one level for a believer, you'd want to say it's just good friendship that develops into marriage, that you're going to do things together, but you're going to think about how you do, I think that's what it is, quite a just unclear kind of world kind of thinking walk, how you do it well, what it actually means.
So would you say that dating always, the aim or the goal should always be marriage or testing the suitability of marriage? Do you think that should always be the goal of a date?
I think dating in the way you defined it, as with that romantic intention, which has sort of elements of intimacy and at least the possibility of physical intimacy, I think that kind of dating should only happen with not an intention to marry necessarily that person, but a real possibility that you could. Yeah. And with an emphasis more on developing the friendship and seeing if this is a person you can love and they can love you in that sacrificial way.
Yeah.
And that is a weird thing because you're kind of raising the stakes of thinking this is someone I could marry, and you're having that kind of conversation, but you're not quite there yet emotionally in another sense. So it is a tricky path, If we could just go return to kind of biblical roots and leave it to parents to, call the shots and arrange marriages.
I think there might be something to be said for that. I know that's a bit controversial, but maybe.
I think it has some values. I think I'd make bad choices. I'm very happy with my in-laws, daughters, and son-in-laws, but I don't think I'd have made a good choice in either of my children's cases. I'm not sure I'd have made as good a choice as they made.
Yeah,
but I do think there is some merit in that. It takes a lot of the hassle out of it.
Somebody I know always says how much she thinks it would be really good to just arrange meetings of people. Say, you know what, I've got these few Christian friends who are women who are single. They would love a godly husband. Oh, you've got a few single, men friends who are godly men. We know that they've got good characters. Let's just introduce them. Like that probably has got to be a helpful thing.
Yes, if people are up for it, but everyone knows as well it's horrific if you're that single person, you're not really wanting a relationship and someone keeps trying to set you up with someone. So there is a horrificness side of that as well. Yeah. But I think what's interesting, what the conversation is raising here, is that a lot of our culture is we do have this whole individualism. And so what has removed from the dating is the wisdom of peers, the wisdom of parents, the wisdom of the church. Yeah. So in other words, I think there is something in that, it not maybe having our parents bind, arrange marriages, but I think has been lost a lot, has been kind of seeking the wisdom of parents, seeking the wisdom of godly peers and friends. What do you think? Can you see this working? I think having those honest conversations is helpful because the reality is we are blinded at times.
I never did any of that. And my husband and I got married very quickly. We hadn't known each other that long, really. And I think it's God's grace that it worked out all right. It could have gone terribly.
Well, God is gracious. And of course, parents can't see everything, can they? Let's face it. And nor can others. And particularly if you're coming from very different backgrounds, you're not even in the same church or et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So it makes it harder. But I think that's where the concept of, if you are thinking about marriage, you are not doing this in isolation. You want that relationship to be exposed to parents, to friendships, to different groups, and allow others to see you. Because I think that's part of testing whether this works. And friends who are asking good questions.
I mean, it's at the sort of negative end, you might say, but I know with at least some members of my family where they were accountable to their friends in terms of where they were and what they were doing with their girlfriend or boyfriend. Not precisely, but you know what I mean. In terms of just keeping the boundaries well, and that was a good thing. And so that's just recognizing our own weakness and need of the community.
Yeah.
Did you agree with the fundamental point though, Mark? Because I'm not sure I used to agree with this point, so I'm slightly hypocritical, that it should always be with a reasonable intention of marriage, or not intention, reasonable possibility of marriage.
Yeah, I think that is right.
Yeah.
I think that has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
That one is one. And of course, we've got to recognise as well that, from biblical times, they would have got married probably 14, 15. Mm-hmm. So you've now kind of got this extended period where physically you're able to engage in a relationship on one level. We may say that not so emotionally developed as maybe they were back then. Obviously, life expectancies weren't as long. But you have got a much more extended period potentially where you are single, which is why I think some of these longer relationships, do begin to happen, because there's a desire for it, but having to wait till it's appropriate to be married. Because legally you could get married at 16, but it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that, afford, and be that independent unit.
We're in a funny situation actually in this country where legally you could get married at 16, but legally you can't leave school till you're 18 now, or in at least some kind of education. So that is another. It's just a bit odd.
Yeah, a bit of a sidebar.
You need your parents' consent, don't you, if you're under 18?
Yeah, but I think that there's a move to raise the age to 18. I think, which is
of
very
marriage
weird.
Or
marriage.
Sexual consent.
No, marriage.
Yeah,
which is
I feel like it should be both.
Yes, but it won't be both. No. If anything, the age of consent will
go down.
Yeah.
But moving the age of marriage to 18 is very bizarre, considering you can make a commitment with your body, but not your life.
Yeah. So did you? You don't have to answer. You can answer rhetorically if you like, or theoretically. Do you think there is an age limit that you would impose on your children for dating? Given if we're saying the goal of dating is to marry, say you had a teenager, just theoretically, would it be better to say actually you cannot go on a date with someone of the opposite sex until you're a certain age? Like, I feel like that's going to cause loads of drama.
What you want. There's what you might want, and then there's what is achievable.
Yeah.
And what is reasonable with a child who's developing into an adult. And
it's probably different of a child who's professing faith than a child who isn't as well. Like, would you have a different rule or just approach it differently? Don't know. Have you got any wisdom?
Well,
either of you?
I think you got. I think if you're talking with teens, you've got to keep engaging with the conversation. So, as Graham says, you're not going to necessarily be able to say, well, you might with a younger, but the older they get, is the kind of forbidding. You can forbid it, but the reality is, if they want to do it, they'll just keep it hidden from you. So it's not going to.
Which has got to be worse, hasn't it?
So it's not necessarily going to stop it per se. So I think what you're wanting to do is keep having the conversations and asking the big questions, particularly if they're growing in faith as well. So you're wanting to ask the questions. Why are you wanting a relationship? Why are you wanting to go? Why can't you just be friends? Why can't you hang out as a group? So I think you're asking the questions and trying to engage in the conversation, and trying to present wisdom, biblical wisdom, to help them navigate this path. And in the end, partly, isn't it, as teenagers get older, they're having to make their own decisions. They're growing in independence. They're getting to that level, and the authority as a parent differs. It's not so much black and white, this rule might. It's more encouraging wisdom and help and grace in that. And sometimes you just have to live with that tension, and kind of be godly in your own responses to it, whilst also keeping on speaking in. The last thing you want to do is to let go, back out.
Yeah. Okay, as in saying you do what you want, I'm not getting involved.
Yeah, and not talking about it.
Okay.
And I think there are some things you can then do if they are dating, because they're in your house. You can impose rules, i.e., you won't be alone in the room, unless the doors are. That you can impose. You're not going up to the bedroom. You can impose because it's your house, but you may not be able to stop them dating per se.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it argued that, boy-girl relationships, at teenage years are still helpful. Like they would let their kids date because it's a good way of just learning how to interact with the opposite sex and how to navigate those kind of things in a, in a practiced way without it being too serious or too, still putting boundaries in place to help them, say there are some rules here, but... what do you think about that kind of thing?
I think there's definitely some values, and I think there is some fun in dating, which is not all bad, and not all kind of sinister. But I think for the reasons we said, overall the package is not particularly helpful when the younger you are, and it's better if you can find ingredients for a relationship that might be with someone of the opposite sex, but which is maybe very, very friendly, but not physically intimate in any sense, and romantically intimate. Those are hard to achieve, but they're possible. Or to just make sure you're just going out in lots of groups, and you can develop lots of interpersonal skills with males and females if you go around in groups quite a lot with mixed sex groups. So I would think that. I think, in the same way that Mark said about not forbidding. I mean, I went out with girls since I was about 11 years old, so I really am a hypocrite about this. But I think after I got baptised at age 17, I don't think there was a single relationship, although there were 2 or 3 girlfriends after that. I don't think there was a single relationship where I didn't consciously think I'm on a path to marrying this person. There wasn't any that I went out with for sort of recreational or for sort of status or for I don't know, just amusement purposes. So I think you can, even at that age, be serious. It's hard because you think it could be like 3 or 4 years minimum before I could marry this person, but I think it is possible. Certainly when
I was
you get
convinced I was
going
to marry my boyfriend when I was 18.
Yes. Why didn't you?
I went to uni and he did not, and that was that. So
interesting.
I was convinced we were gonna, do the long distance and get married, but God's providence didn't.
No, well, that was a good test of it all.
Quite. That it worked out right. Got some children who wouldn't have existed otherwise.
I am. It's a different point, but I am really now in favour of short courtships like you had, and quickly arranged marriages, not arranged by parents. Quickly arranged.
Just throw them together, see what happens.
Yeah, I think I might have had this rant on another podcast, so I won't get into it too much. But I think lowering the expense and expectations to do with the wedding day, and that will allow you to arrange it much more quickly. I think there's a lot of very worldly elements in the way we do marriage at times, the way we do weddings, and
agree.
So I'm all in favour of that, and I don't mean short as in 3 weeks. Courtship. No. You have to be long enough to have gone through a bit of a few things back and forth. But I think
if you are dating without being engaged for a long period, I think you've got to ask the question: where is this relationship going?
What are you doing?
And normally it's the guy not wishing to step up to the plate and commit.
Yeah.
Not always, but then I think there is questions there. Why aren't you prepared to commit? So I think if this is an extended dating, there's you hear of folks dating for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're kind of going, why? What's going on there? Why are you not committing and getting married? Because it can't. Now there may be some very, very good reasons. University stage career. It may be that you get engaged and you can't get married straight away because of whatever. your work commitments, exams, etc. stage of life. But generally, I think Graham's principle is right. You want to get engaged, and get on, as it were. Now, as I said,
get engaged and get on.
Well, you get on and get married. I mean, but in a sense,
get married or go home. Someone I used to say.
Well, let me be clear. There may be good reasons for a long period of dating because of particular circumstances, but often that's not the case. Often, I think if you want to get married, you will work the circumstances to make it happen in some way.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, let's go there. Let's talk sex. Obviously, we believe the Bible teaches that sexual intimacy is one man, one woman within marriage, that is God's good plan for sex. So how can people who are dating, how can they help themselves to live that out in a way according to God's good plan? And how can those who, their friends and family and such, what are some just practical ways that we can help that to happen in a good way?
Well, we've spoken to some of them, haven't we? Graham mentioned
I think you're talking particularly like teenagers, but
also
older adults,
just older adults as well. Just having friends who hold you accountable.
Yeah.
I think having time in groups rather than just always being alone, guarding where you are alone, making sure that you're sensible about, being, in rooms on your own intention. And particularly if you're getting married, then all the emotions are going to be cranking up. It would be slightly weird if they weren't. So in one sense, there is a guarding of our own hearts, isn't there? And seeking to do what is right. And particularly as the bloke in the relationship, you have a responsibility to try and seek to do that rightly. So I think it's most people are aware. We're all aware of the temptations, and it's just being sensible and guarding and being willing to be accountable to it, and not being naive to think that you won't feel those emotions.
Yeah, I think the Song of Songs is great, where it talks about not awakening love until it so desires, which I think is about intimacy and holding back, because there's a lot to do with young girls and keeping them pure for marriage and so on. And then in the New Testament, there's a lot about self-control and controlling our own bodies. And I do like, although he's practically a heretic on many other things, I still like the Steve Chalk example on this one, which is if you're in some Swiss Austrian mountain road somewhere and the cliff is on the edge and there's a white line that says don't go over this, you're not going to drive as close as you possibly can to the white line or to the cliff edge without actually falling over it. You're going to probably hug the other side of the road. And I think to even extend that further, you don't want to start accelerating towards the cliff edge with the hope that you're going to stop before you get to the edge. Yeah. Which is my example. That analogy, that is. So I think that in the kind of extending the being sensible, you obviously don't want to. Well, you don't want to be doing stuff which is in practice heading towards the sexual act, but not quite getting there. And of course, there's quite a lot of stages before that, and so on. But if you're basically moving at speed towards that, but not quite having sex, then you really are careering towards the cliff edge at high speed, hoping that you're going to break.
Yeah. I'm thinking there probably aren't any married couples who are thinking, "Oh, I wish we'd gone further before we're married." That can't be the case, can it?
That's the world's example, isn't it? The world says
sure.
You want to try before you buy. But no, I don't think so.
No, I don't, and it is hard because you do want to express affection towards one another, and particularly as it gets nearer to the wedding day. And anyone who's listening to this, is not like we're idealists, and we're all failures in this, and we recognise that just as in other areas we may sin, either in thought or act, we have a loving and gracious God who forgives us. But we still want to strive towards the ideal, don't we? We want to encourage our children to do that, and to encourage, in a way, future generations to do better than we did in lots of ways. Because when you sin sexually, you sin against your own body. The other person involved sins against their own body in a way that affects you differently to many other areas of sinfulness. And in another way, it's a kind of the ultimate lack of self-control. So it is significant.
Yeah, because Paul sets sexual sin apart from other sins. So, because sometimes I think it seems like Christians are obsessed with sex. Sex is bad, and it's not that at all. Sex is God's good design for humans, but it is. Paul does say it is, as you've already said, it does affect us more.
Yes, yeah, because we can't separate mind and body. It's not as though we can perform a sexual act with our body and our mind somehow isn't corrupted by that.
But the world would say that.
Would completely separate the two. But I think because we're one being, when we commit sexually, we commit with our body and our soul, as it were, and so that does have implications, and that they can be forgiven, and they don't necessarily ruin a relationship forever, and you have to live with shame, but they will have rubble, they will have effects, and it won't be pleasing to God at that moment, but it also may have consequences in just how the relationship pans out after that. So we need to keep that in mind as well as the actual sort of practical. I think always the positive, because it's sometimes when you're talking to teenagers particularly, you feel like you're just saying no kind of to stuff, and it's really good, but just no. And I think saying this is good it is helpful to keep emphasizing how good it is to have really good relationships, to behave like brothers and sisters, to have the excitement of the possibility of marriage and intimacy, but to look forward to that in a context that will be most pleasing to God is a very good thing.
It is, yeah.
Amen.
So apart from sex and that whole category, are there any other pitfalls that people dating or considering dating might fall into that is helpful to try and avoid?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think some of the ones I fell into was becoming a bit selfish and self-centered. So although you become probably in a way that's not always helpful, a little bit obsessed with yourselves and your relationship, and sometimes not much help to your friends and family at certain times. So I think there's that can be a danger. It can work the other way, that you become really helpful to your family.
Yeah. Emotional intensity. So we talked about the kind of physical intensity, but you can have an emotional intensity that isn't often helpful, or the emotional intensity is too intense for this stage of the relationship as well, which can make things hard and awkward. So and expectations. So in one sense, although you may not be you're maintaining purity and physically, you can be acting like you're married before you're married, and that can have implications that are just not helpful in the sense of your expectations are not quite right, and how that then plays itself out in the ongoing relationship. Yeah,
that's helpful. What about dating non-Christians? Could Christians ever date a non-Christian? Is that right? Is that wrong? Is it always right, always wrong?
I don't see. I think if you're going on the premise of what we've said earlier, that you're dating in order to think about marriage, then I think the Bible is clear that a believer is to marry a believer, and I think therefore date a non-Christian, you're kind of setting yourself up. Why would you be dating them if you can't marry them?
Yeah.
Or you're kind of giving yourself false hope. Well, I'll date them, and then I can. They'll come to Christ, and then I'll marry them. Then I'd say, don't date them until, they're ready. But, as my boys were told once, not by me, flirt to convert.
Is that genuine advice?
It was a slight tongue-in-cheek, a bit of advice, really. But on a Christian camp. By a youth leader that made us chuckle. So that's not dating, it's just flirting to convert.
Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, probably. And probably rightly.
Yeah, I mean, there are examples.
A thoughtful face on. I wouldn't even know how to flirt to convert.
Me neither.
Is it okay after you're married to flirt to convert if you're not dating?
That's definitely not allowed.
Good,
there are definitely examples in our church, or have been in our church, where people have gone out with a non-Christian and it has worked out well in that they've been converted. So, but you can't use that as an example, really, because there are also lots of examples of people who have given up on the faith, or certainly given up on any depth of the faith, by going out with and then subsequently marrying someone who's not a Christian. And sadly, lots of cases where the spouse hasn't become a Christian, and maybe the other spouse has hold on to their faith, but it's much harder work.
Yeah.
And it's a much looser connection then with the church, and there's the lifetime of just that struggle with, getting to church yourself, getting the kids to church when your spouse doesn't want, is not particularly positive about it.
And just the ongoing pain, you see that within those, for a variety of reasons, even if they've married as two non-Christians and one of them's come to faith, then just the ongoing pain, or they've married as two believers and then one's gone away, and you just see the pain actually that can bring to the marriage, just to the heartache. So there's situations which no one's done anything wrong on, in terms of a believer. So how then, why would you want to put yourself into that situation from the get-go if you don't have to?
Yeah.
And patience.
Yeah. In all of this, do we undervalue singleness?
I'm sure we must. There are a lot of single people in our church and in lots of churches, single because they've been divorced, single because of death, single because they haven't married yet, single because they are not attracted to people of the opposite sex. So there's all kinds of reasons you may end up being single.
Yeah.
And I don't know about whether we undervalue it. Maybe we don't always care well for people who are not neatly into families. I think we do value the capacity and the gifting that single people have and can bring to the church, and that it's a very legitimate status that is not inadequate or incomplete, if that's what God has planned for you, either for your life or for this moment in your life. And I think we're okay with that, but maybe just at a really practical level of realizing that a single person just needs a different kind of care to a married person in a family. And that's probably what we're not so good at. It's not so much the principled stuff or the, how we value. It's how we not care for in a patronizing way, but how we include is probably a better way.
Yeah. And maybe I was just wondering if when we're talking with our kids about all this, maybe we don't include singleness as just a valid choice when they grow up. They might just choose to be single, maybe choice or maybe not choice, but like that is singleness is good. Like that is it's a good way to live your life. It's not that marriage is the absolute best thing.
And I think that's probably where we can also do it, alongside all that Graham's helpfully said, is that we can make marriage the absolute kind of earthly heaven.
Yeah.
And family life as the be all and end all of everything, and that it's the thing, and and that's guys who are married have got to guard their hearts against it becoming an idol, the family becoming idolatrous.
Yeah. Well, even as Graham said, well, why didn't I marry my teenage boyfriend? I even said, it all worked out all right. I did get married and have kids, like as if that makes it okay that I didn't, when actually it was okay anyway. Even if that hadn't happened.
Indeed.
Sorry, I kind of cut you off.
No, it's all good.
Carry on your thought.
No, I think I hadn't got anything else extra to say, I think, on that. So
great. I think that's us then.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you on this topic. I do know a few youngish people who listen, so might be interested, but lots of people who are parents and working through that, and you may have lots of better ideas. So.
And there's probably different challenges for dating as those who are older. There's probably just, particularly those maybe who have lost spouses, and then sort to get remarried and how you date in that. You're probably facing some of the same challenges, it's worth just saying. The temptations, similar temptations, but navigating maybe extended families, children, will add a complicating factor, but being prayerful, wise, thoughtful, how we do that.
Very good bonus point, that, Katie.
It might be worth doing a whole topic on divorce and navigating that as well in future as well, because we haven't even mentioned that. But there is not time now, and it would be good to do that properly, I think. So, all right, we'll see you next time, everybody. You've been listening to Ordinary, the podcast seeking to help ordinary Christians live for Christ in everyday life. If you found this helpful, please do share with a friend. Come and find us on social media. We'd love to have you join our conversations. You can find us on Twitter @OrdinaryCCHH, on Instagram @OfficialOrdinaryPodcast, and on YouTube @OrdPod, that's ORDPOD. Or you can email your comments or questions to ordinary@cchh.org.uk. We'll see you next time.